This tutorial focuses on using the Sync Wizard to analyze samples that were blocked in G0, G1 and then released. We'll create a project to help manage the FCS files and the output. To start with, I'm going to create a new project by clicking the New button here. This project will be a synchronized cell cycle project, which means that we're going to use the Sync Wizard. So we'll create the project, give it a name. It will be located in our projects folder. Now I'm going to click the More button here because I want to have this project copy the data files that I select so that they're stored within the project locally. I'll click OK. And my next step is to select the FCS files that we want to analyze. We'll use the Open FCS File button to do that. These files are in the Samples Sync folder within the location where ModFit LT is installed on your computer. I've multiple selected these files, and now I'll click Open. When I do that, we see the list of files that I selected here in our batch list. The first file has been read, and we can see there's just a single G0, G1 peak, which is what we expect in the beginning of our study. The next thing that we want to do is take a look at how to set up the actions that happen when we read a file. So, as we saw previously when we created the project, this is a synchronized cell type of project. Now what that means is we're using the Sync Wizard, and so the only thing that we can do here with that is to fit the data with the model that the Sync Wizard creates. So this drop down is disabled. But we can choose what kinds of things we want to output. So I'll enable the report and the PDF output. The output will be saved in the project output folder, and I will leave printing turned off for now. Our next step is to go to the Sync Wizard and set up that Sync Wizard model. So we're in the starting position on the Sync Wizard. Let's visit the first important tab, which is this G0, G1 tab. Here we see the same plot that we saw in the report. It's showing us our G0, G1, and ModFit LT's Sync Wizard has positioned this red triangle directly over that peak. It's looking for the first peak that it sees in this sample, and it's assuming that that's the G0, G1 position, which is correct. This is the important part of this particular tab. We're going to have it automatically adjust this position from file to file. For another study, we could choose to lock this position and the standard deviation. One other thing here, if the program loads a file and doesn't find a peak near this position, we're going to tell it to go ahead and use the last known position. The other choice is here for it to ask us what to do. Moving on to the G2M tab, our typical expectation is that the G2M would be at approximately twice the position of the G0, G1, and that's why this red triangle is positioned out here at 802, which is a G2, G1 ratio of 2. Well, this particular instrument is not quite so linear, so I'm going to type in a value that is more appropriate for this instrument, which moves our red cursor and adjusts the expected G2M position. Moving to the S phase tab, here we can select different ways to model the S phase in our Sync Wizard model. It's set up by default to use a rectangle shape. That's a broadened rectangle, which has 3 compartments. It's sort of like having 3 rectangles in a row. And those 3 rectangles will be equally spaced. But we also could choose to use a trapezoid, which has another degree of freedom, and we can adjust the number of compartments, adding more or less degrees of freedom. We also can choose how the spacing of those compartments is, whether it's equally spaced or exponentially increasing. This is a good setup to start with. So we visit the Other tab. Here's where we can add some cleanup components to the Sync Wizard model. We don't need them for this study, so I'll leave them disabled. But in many of your own studies, you may find these very handy. Finally, on the Report tab, you have some options about what kinds of things you want to display on the analysis report. Generally, the default settings are pretty good. So we'll choose the Analyze button. The Sync Wizard model is then created and applied to our first sample. We can see the fit of the G0, G1 here, virtually no S phase and no G2M. Over on the right, we see the statistics. Here's G0, G1 with its percentage and position. Here's G2M and S phase, which again has almost no events in it. This is a good time to create a database, since we might want to store this so that we could do further processing on and analyzing the whole set of files. So to do that, we'll click the Edit tab on the ribbon and use the Database Wizard. We have a welcome screen on the wizard which we can pass through, and really when we created our project, the program created an empty database for us with the same name as the project. The Sync Wizard tutorial database is the one we want to use. So we'll click Finish. The Database Wizard creates a database with 29 fields and then displays a database viewer for us as well with the field names along the top. So let's analyze this first file again by pressing the Run button on our batch. This will set us up so that the database will show records as we go forward. It will wait until we move to the next file to add a record for this one. Let's click the Next button to move to that next file. Our first record is added in the database, and we can see things have changed, but not very much. Let's add an element to this report to help us see that. I'm going to go to the Insert tab, and here I'll click the Y Zoom button, which creates a zoomed view of our histogram. And here we can see that there is indeed some very low-level S phase starting to creep in here. And you can see the first of 3 rectangles here, the second here, and the third here. It looks like we're off to a good start. Let's move to the next file. Here we see more S phase in this sample. I'll continue to move through these. With each file that comes in, the program is searching for that G0, G1 position, moving it if it needs to, and then fitting the model to it. It's also saving the PDF and report for the file that we're leaving. And so on we go to the next. More S phase, on we go to the next. Here's the first file that actually has some G2M in it, and you can see things are really leaving the G0, G1, and there are a large number of cells that have moved into S phase and many that are starting into G2M. On this last file, we see almost no cells in the G0, G1, and many more in the G2M in fact. And that's how you work with a Sync Wizard project in ModFit LT.